After moving into the new house, located on the shore of a quiet lake deep in the forest, I immediately felt a strange tension. During the day, the place seemed like a paradise, a picturesque view of the mirror-like surface of the water, the crowns of trees reflecting in the lake, and birdsong filling the air. The house stood on a hill, surrounded by a dense forest, from where the rustling of leaves could sometimes be heard, but at night everything changed. When the sun was below the horizon, the house was plunged into impenetrable darkness. The windows, which during the day offered a view of nature, turned into black mirrors, reflecting only the interior light. I felt like I was in an aquarium on display. The forest that looked cozy during the day turned into a wall of shadow hiding something unseen but ominous. On the first night, I decided to distract myself by watching a movie. Turning on the TV, I made myself comfortable on the couch, but I couldn't focus. The silence outside the windows was frightening. There was no sound of wind, no singing of night birds, just an oppressive silence that made my thoughts dart around. At one point, I heard a faint rustling outside. At first I thought it was an animal, but the sound was repeated, and it was clearly too uniform. I went out onto the porch to check, but saw nothing, just the woods flooded with darkness. Returning to the house, I noticed something odd. There were faint marks on one of the windows, as if someone had run their fingers over the glass. I looked closer, but I couldn't figure out where they had come from. The next night, I still couldn't get rid of the disturbing thoughts. After going to bed, I woke up in the middle of the night with the feeling that someone was watching me. Trying to convince myself that it was just fear, I turned my head to the window. And there, behind the glass, I saw something. It was a barely recognizable silhouette moving along the wall of the house, as if checking the windows. Its movements were jagged and strange, as if it didn't belong to a person. I froze, watching the creature. It didn't look inward, but its presence caused me to break out in a cold sweat. After a moment, the figure disappeared into the darkness, leaving me in a daze. On the third night, I decided to be wary. Around midnight, I heard a strange sound coming from outside. It was a knocking, quiet at first, then more insistent. It came from the door and the windows, as if someone was walking around the house trying to get my attention. I turned on the light and listened, my heart pounding like crazy. The sound stopped, but I couldn't calm down. Determined to figure it out, I went outside. The forest greeted me with silence, but in the distance I noticed a strange flicker, like the light of a flashlight. It was moving erratically, too fast for a human. I watched it until the light disappeared, leaving me in complete darkness. On the fourth night, I was finally convinced that I was not alone in this house. Waking up in the middle of the night, I saw a shadow in the corner of the room. It was blurred, as if its outline could not be defined. The shadow stood still, but I felt the air around me become icy. Gathering my wits, I asked quietly, "Who are you?" There was a barely audible whisper, but I couldn't make out the words. Unable to stand the tension, I ran to the bathroom and locked myself inside. My heart was pounding so loudly that it seemed a shadow could hear it. I heard a knock on the bathroom door. I heard, not a knock, but a tapping, and it wasn't like the tapping of a finger. It was the sound of metal, like he was banging with a knife on the door, and that's when I realized that this person either knew what I was doing or he just wanted me to let me know that he was behind the door. Deciding to escape through the window, I slowly opened it, trying not to make a sound. But as I started to climb out, I felt my leg being grabbed. A cold, dark hand squeezed my ankle, and then I felt a sharp pain. Immediately afterward, before I could react, I felt that my ankle had been cut. I let out a sound of shock and surprise as I broke free from his grip. I fell to the ground. I began to gasp for breath and felt as if my heart was going to explode. I stood up and looked around and very quickly rushed into the woods and fell to the ground. I felt my ankle, which was throbbing with pain, that it was covered with blood. It was a deadly serious situation. I looked back at the house and suddenly saw the back door swing open and a shadowy figure coming down the stairs. I started looking around into the darkness looking for a place to hide. I pressed myself to the ground so I couldn't be seen. I was trying to control my breathing. The shadow was getting closer. I could see a huge knife in its hand. The shadow was heading into the woods, but not near where I was lying. At first light, I made my way out of the forest. As I approached the house, I saw that the front door was open. I took the keys, got in the car, and drove out of the driveway, trying not to look back. I drove down a narrow country road surrounded by dense forests, and I kept catching myself looking in the rearview mirror. It seemed to me that there was a flicker of movement in the shadows of the trees, as if something or someone was following me. Every shadow, every play of light on the side of the road made my heart pound faster. The road led to a small store in the nearest village. I had hoped to find some solace there, some human company that might allay my fears. But when I reached the store, I realized that my calm had left me completely. When I got out of the car, everything was quiet around me. There were no other cars in the parking lot, and I felt a chill run down my spine. I caught my reflection in the puddle next to the car. For a moment, I thought I saw a shadow flicker in the reflection behind me, but when I turned around, I saw nothing unusual. I hurried into the store. The old salesman behind the counter barely looked at me, mumbling a greeting. I picked up a few things, a bottle of water, batteries, a pack of cookies. My hands shook as I placed the purchases on the register. I tried not to look out the store windows, but the feeling that I was being watched never left me. When I got back into the car and closed the door, I finally felt relatively safe, but that didn't last long. I pulled onto the highway and tried to focus on the road, but the feeling that something was wrong was getting stronger. Every time I looked in the rearview mirror, I thought I saw something moving in the distance, but as I looked, I couldn't see anything.